Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. All right, I'm so excited to welcome some awesome people to the podcast. We're having our second ever Sister Connection episode where we're hearing from people who have lived experience in the topic that we're talking about. This month, we're talking about relationship and problems in relationships. And specifically in this episode, we are talking about supporting somebody who has left the church, ministering to somebody who's left the church. And so I have some really awesome people on to share their stories and what helped them when on their journey away from the church and back to the church. So I'd like to welcome first Lauren Rose to the podcast. Lauren, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, maybe a little bit about your family and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Lauren Rose. I was born in Utah. We moved a little bit when I was younger, but primarily like St. George, Salt Lake is where I'm from. I am married and I have two identical twins that are 3. So I'm very busy. I used to be an accountant, but I recently stepped away from working. And so now I am partnered with Ashley Stone with the Comeback podcast, and we run that podcast together. So I've been doing a lot of I have been doing the editing and all of the background work, but we're growing our team. So thankfully I'm stepping away from editing because that takes a lot of time. And I'm just going to try and help grow the podcast some more. But that podcast is about specifically people coming back to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and just their stories and what brought them back and what they've learned. So it's been a great honor to be able to work on that project.
I love that podcast. If you guys haven't listened to the Comeback podcast, it is amazing. And I'm so excited to hear Lauren's story and to have her share here and that she would take your time to come here. So thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
All right. We also have Christina Pope on the podcast. Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, where you're from, and what you spend your days doing?
So I was born and raised in Rexburg, Idaho. I currently live in Idaho Falls now with my husband, and we have not been blessed with the opportunity to have children yet, but we have 4 dogs and 4 turtles, and
Awesome.
I work full time from home. So in my spare time, I just clean up after my dogs and I crochet. I just learned to crochet, so I'm
That's
trying to
awesome.
expand that and cooking and cleaning.
Oh,
My callings and
very cool. Well,
that kind of
awesome. Welcome. You guys, have you gotten much snow up there in Idaho yet?
We did just this week. So I
Okay.
was actually in Utah yesterday. My niece got her endowments and my sister got sealed.
Oh,
And so
awesome.
it always blows my mind how little snow there. Well, there was no snow, but
Yeah, it's been crazy in
yeah,
Utah
but
this
we got
year.
a bunch.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Very cool. Well, I'm so excited to hear your story. So, what we're going to do is we'll have Christina share her story first. Just tell us a little bit about your experience with somebody who ministered to you when you were away from the church, what that meant to you, and what was significant about that that helped you come back to the church.
So when I was thinking about it, several people ministered to me at different times. I can't remember exactly when I left the church, but I was a teenager. And I would still attend sacrament meeting if there was like a baby blessing for a family member or something, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember one time when I went to a baby blessing for one of my nieces and nephews, and my niece, she was probably 3 or 4 at the time. She was sitting with her parents, and I was sitting on the end of the pew so I could sneak out right after the blessing because I just felt really weird to be there. And it was the opening hymn, and she picked up her hymn book and walked down and sat right next to me and just opened it. So she was like 3, and she like I know it's like so small, but it just like still she's the one that got her endowments out yesterday. So she I don't know. It was just a big impact on my life that a 3-year-old noticed that I was like alone and felt a little uncomfortable, and she just wanted to sing her opening hymn with me. So that was kind of fun.
Amazing.
But that was a small one. So there were two others. So I had a friend that every single conference, twice a year, would message me and say, "Hey, it's conference. I would love for you to come watch it with me or watch it. And here's the link." And I would say, "No, I'm good. Thanks, though." And so for years and years and years, she did that. And so now when I watch conference, I always think of her. And so I message her and be like, "Hey, thinking of you." And she's like, "Yeah, I was thinking of you too." Because now I watch it. And so that always meant a lot.
Oh,
But the biggest impact for me, it was in April of 2019, and I was on a trip to Arizona with my mom and her best friend to visit my brother that was in prison.
wow.
And when we left the prison, I had a text message asking me if I had done my ministering that month. Well, I was furious because in my mind I was being chastised for something that I hadn't done, and because I didn't even know I was a ministering sister. And I would have loved the opportunity because I was kind of lonely because I wasn't active in the church and I didn't really have any friends. Um, so even though I wasn't really ready to go back to church, I would have loved the opportunity to be a ministering sister to meet other people.
Mm.
Um, so I was really mad that she was like chastising me for not doing something that I didn't know I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So I was complaining to my mom because she was the Relief Society president in her ward. And she was just laughing at me. And she's like, "Well, just text her back and say you didn't know that you were a ministering sister and ask who your companion is."
Yeah.
So I did that, and she told me the name of my companion. And I'm reading this out loud to my mom and her best friend, and my mom's best friend was like, "Wait, I know someone by that name." And I was like, "Okay, that's I'm lots of people have the same name." She's like, "Ask her if she grew up in Rexburg." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Did you grow up in Rexburg?" And she's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Did you grow up on this street?" She's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Did you grow up at this address?" And she's like, "Yeah." So come to find out, her family sold their house and my family moved in before I was born.
Oh my goodness.
And then they moved to Washington and she got married and got divorced and moved to Idaho Falls and became my ministering companion. And we grew up in the same house.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know. It was just amazing that like God is in the details, and like I knew that I believed in God, but I didn't really understand that he knew who I was. And
Yeah.
so like it just made the biggest impact on my life and her life, that knowing that like God knew who we were, you know? Like
Mhm.
the chances that we grew up in the exact same house and then
Yeah.
she moved away and came back, and
That's
I don't
so
know.
amazing. That's so amazing. God
Yeah.
is in so many of the details, and like nobody knew any of that, right? Like it's
No.
not like anybody set all of that up except for God, right? Like that is
Yeah.
just you can just notice the divine in all the details of that. And I think sometimes it's
Yeah.
really hard as a ministering sister to trust that those details will be lined up and
Yeah.
and that they will happen. But God is always sort of working these miracles behind the scenes.
Yeah. And um, I eventually came back to the church, and me and my husband got sealed in the temple right before COVID shut down the temples. So if we had waited, like who knows what would have happened. But
Right.
yeah, we got permission to get sealed right before they shut down. And so me and her, like we just were the best of friends. And
Um,
it was just such a big impact that like if God knew me, a lost and angry girl that was down in Arizona visiting her brother in prison, and he could help guide me back to the gospel and meet so many wonderful people who have made me feel like I matter and that like, you know, there's hope, then I know he knows everybody else. You just kind of have to figure out how to find that, right? Like I didn't go looking for it, but
right.
it just,
Right.
yeah, it was amazing.
And how amazing for that Relief Society sister or president to just follow through with a prompting like that, right?
Yeah, they must have like really been listening to the spirit when they assigned us as companions or something.
Yes. Have you shared that with her before?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Actually, like I not not the president. I don't know who the president was back then. I
Yeah.
should. I should reach out to
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
That's so amazing. That's awesome. So you feel like that ministering sister, or it was your companion, right? That you were
Mhm.
ministering with. Um, and she made an impact on you wanting to come back to the church and starting to participate in the activities and build your testimony.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and my husband had taken before missionaries could like be on their phones and stuff. My little brother got permission when he was on his mission in California to give me and my husband lessons over Zoom.
Wow.
um or well, it was Skype back then,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so we had started taking the lessons, and my husband, he was actually atheist when I met him. He was raised LDS too,
Okay.
but he had left the church. And he's like, well, I want my kids raised in the church, but I don't want to go. And I was like, well, then who's going to take them? And he's like, oh, your mom will. And I was like, I don't know if she will. But
Yeah.
then we started taking the lessons from my brother, and we started paying tithing, and we had so many blessings from that, like
Wow.
so many. And so we still didn't go to church, and we stopped taking the lessons, and we continued to pay tithing like our whole marriage, even though we didn't go to church for the first like 7 years of our marriage. So
Oh my
we
goodness.
just like tithing is the biggest like blessing we've had in our lives, that we have a very, very firm testimony.
That's amazing. So all of that with your brother was prior
Yeah, there was
to
there
these
was a lot.
interactions. Yeah.
Yeah, there
Yes.
was a lot of people that helped, that knew that for some reason we needed to be back in the gospel. So, and
Yeah. I think what I learned from your story too is that it can be the small and simple things that add up over time, right? That it
yeah,
wasn't just one bam significant thing. And I think sometimes we think that as ministering sisters, like, what's going to be the thing that I can do, right? Like, what's the one thing I can do to make the difference? And it's really not about a big giant thing. It can be going and sitting by somebody and never saying anything, right? Opening a hymn
yeah,
book and just sitting by them, right? And sharing your
yeah.
spirit with them in that way. I love that. And the consistency, it sounds like, that your friend
I think
who
so. Yeah,
was sharing about general conference and that you knew where to go and when you were ready for that, that she had been consistent and you probably knew you could talk to her after that.
yeah. And I was thinking last conference, I was like, I want to be that friend for someone now, right? So I was like, but every time I like type something out, I'm like, it sounds like I'm like pushing you, right? Like, come watch conference. And
Yeah.
I was like, I never felt that way when she messaged me. So like I scrolled back to see how she had like invited me, and she was just so nice. And we had, we were friends before, and
Yeah.
so we had that good connection. But
Yeah.
she wasn't pushy. She was just kind and said, I'm inviting you if you want to, and no judgment either way. We just love you.
Yeah. That's so good to know. Yes. Because you don't want to be that pushy, right? You don't want to say
Yeah,
the wrong thing or have them feel like they need to distance themselves from you because you're being pushy. But it sounds like kindness and just love, no matter what decision you make, is great.
I
But we
think that
want
really
you to
goes a
know the
long way.
offers out there.
Hmm.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that it's that you share the different aspects of that. And I'm
I know
sure
there's a lot of them, but
yeah, yeah. I'm sure you have more. If you think of more,
I
I would love
do.
to. Yeah. Yes. Let's hear from Lauren because Lauren, I bet you can kind of relate with some of what Kirsten was saying too around that. But I would love to hear your unique story in the ministering efforts of other people. I know that you have kind of a specific couple, right? That was helping you in your journey, or
A
was it people at
couple.
work?
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
My bosses.
yeah.
So, my story, I grew up in the church. We left when my parents got divorced when I was about 12. And it was like just kind of cold turkey. Well, actually, you know what? We kind of were not going as frequently before the divorce, but then after the divorce, it was like cold turkey, stop going to church. Um and then my I wanted to stay in St. George, so my mom moved up to Salt Lake where we were from, and all of our extended families up here. So she wanted to be close to family, which made sense. But me being like a stubborn 16-year-old, I didn't want to move with her. So I stayed in St. George with like my dad and my brother. and they were making pretty poor decisions that caused me a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And so we have, addiction in my family, mental health. So I was really unplugged from the church.
Mm.
Like, I'm not even sure some of my friends in high school even knew I was raised LDS. I was like, I
Oh,
don't think people thought I was even LDS. Some people that really knew me, like obviously knew, but um yeah, so I was very unplugged, and then I ended up moving to Salt Lake, and I was still just really distant from the church. Um, my dad's family is very active, and then my mom's side of the family is not, and some of them aren't members at all. So um, I obviously like kind of gravitated more to my mom's side of the family, but I would see my dad's side at like Christmas parties and like, Thanksgiving and stuff. And honestly, that was the most exposure that I had to the church for years. I
wow.
didn't have anybody like reach out to me. I mean, it was kind of like this perfect situation where I could be isolated because I moved
Mm.
and I didn't grow up in Salt Lake, so nobody like knew me.
Yeah.
And like I had friends up here that I knew from St. George that had also moved up here, but they all partied. And so I was still like in the party scene, and I was never like an addict. I would just, go to the bar with my friends and stuff like that. But um let's see. So I just ended up getting to a point where I was like always wondering what I believed in, but I didn't believe in God. I didn't identify as anything. I just was like, I wasn't like, I'm atheist. I just never talked about it. But
Yeah.
I had decided that I didn't believe in God, after all the trauma that I had been through because, and I've heard other people say this, but you feel God forsaken. And so how could there be a God that would allow the things that have happened in your life to happen? So that's kind of where my where how I decided that. But so I got to a point where I was just trying to do life completely on my own.
Yeah.
And my family wasn't doing good. They weren't making good choices. And at this point, nobody in my immediate family is active. And I got to such a low point because it was like I just kept dating these like same type of guy that was just really kind of narcissistic, emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't change, why nothing around me was changing, and I wasn't happy. Um and then I went through this really hard breakup, and I just was so I felt so defeated, and I was so humble, and I got on my knees and I was like, I've got to figure out if there's a God. Like I can't do this alone anymore. And I just looked up a singles ward and I just started going to church because
Oh
that
my
was like
goodness.
that I knew, right? And I had intentions to like go to other churches because I was like, if I'm gonna like do this, I wanna I want to do the one that fits me the best. And so I started with the LDS church, and then while I was there, it was just like I was so humble and so broken that I was so close to the spirit. And when people were talking, it was like the Holy Ghost was so loud or I had such a strong connection with the Holy Ghost that I was just remembering everything. And I'm like, these people are speaking truth. Like I knew everything that they were saying was true because I had lived it. I had left the church and I was miserable. And I can't remember exactly what they said in like Sunday school class because this was a while ago. It's been like 13 years now.
Yeah.
Um, but like the scripture, wickedness never was happiness, like just things like that. It's like I knew it. I knew it to my core. And so I just kept coming back to the LDS church because I just was soaking everything up like this sponge. It was just like remembering everything. And people were talking to me about getting a witness. And I was like, I want this witness. What are they, like this sounds really great. I want a witness. And so um somebody in Sunday school was like, you can't be a 50 watt, I'm going to totally botch this. Like, it was like, it can't be like a 50-watt light bulb and a 100-watt circuit or something. And so you have to be wired for the answer that you want. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get this answer. So I went home and I prayed and I was like, okay, Heavenly Father, like, will you wire me to be a 100-watt bulb because I want that answer. And then I don't know, it was like a couple days later, I had my brother over. And so mind you, like I'm starting to come back like completely by myself. Like
Yeah.
I yeah, I just like I don't know. I'm crazy, I guess. I don't
Oh,
know.
it's
But
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I wasn't gonna bring any of my friends with me. They were like, "Why are you going to church? Like,
Yeah.
let's have a beer or whatever,
Yeah.
like, what are you doing?" So, my brother comes over for dinner and I'm starting to tell him about all these truths that I'm discovering and like how amazing like the church really is. And as I was testifying to him, I received my witness. And it was like I was in mid-sentence talking about when you do something for God, God does something back for you. And my entire body started like vibrating. It felt like I was buzzing and floating. And I remember I stopped talking and I looked around and I was like, am I floating right now? Like it was the
Wow.
most intense feeling I'd ever had. And it felt like it lasted for a minute, but it was probably 5 seconds. And I just sat there and stared at my brother in shock. And then he was just like, what's going on, you know? And yeah, so I received my witness and I've never felt that again, but I will never forget that and I can't ever deny it. And so I was so, after that, I just did like this complete 180 and I was all in with the church. I was eating the gospel up, but where the ministering comes in is sorry, I got lost in my story.
You're great. No.
While I was coming back to church before I got my witness, I was called into the bishop's office to get a calling. And I thought that he had called me in to be like, so who are you? Like, you must have not been here for a long time. Like, what
Yeah.
brought you back? But
Yeah.
like he had no idea. And so he tells me he's gonna extend me this calling. And I was like, I don't think I can have a calling. And so then I kind of started telling him what was going on, and he was just like, whoa, like what? What is happening? And so I started talking with the missionaries, and they were like giving me the lessons, but I don't think we really got very far into the lessons. Um, I can't remember why, but after that, like, I don't know if this girl was like assigned to me, but we ended up being friends. At least I thought we were friends. But hey, I didn't know the difference. That's how genuine she was.
Right?
Um, no, I think we're still friends. We're still friends. But she was amazing. Her name is Sarah, what is her married name? Eliason. She's amazing. Super smart. But she would just answer all these questions for me. And so she was ministering me on my way back and then also at work. I also rewind, sorry. I also started thinking about the church, or instead of just probably before I got on my knees to talk to God, what made me even want to do that was the men that I was working for. I was working at a private equity firm as their office manager while I was going through school. And they were just the best guys I had met in a very, very long time, if not ever.
Wow.
And so, because like, the men I had in my life as examples were using drugs and drinking, and not that that makes you a terrible person, but I'm not gonna lie, like there were some terrible things done. So
Yeah.
I meet these men that were just like this amazing example to me, and I watched how other people treated them and the amount of respect that they had and how stable their lives were. Like they didn't have all this drama going on, and they were so smart and so wise and very like they were just very impressive
Mm.
and very educated, very successful businessmen, but they were just you wouldn't know how successful they were because they just were humble people.
Yeah.
And so their example is what made me even think about maybe this church thing, maybe there's something to it. So as I started coming back to church, I started asking them questions, and I got pretty close with one of my bosses, and we're still friends to this day. And I see him and his wife occasionally, and they're just awesome. So I started just going to him a lot and telling him like my story. And asking him all these questions, and I would ask, the other two questions, but I didn't see them as often, but they always just answered them for me. And I'm sure that I was annoying, but it was like, I just thought the gospel was just so amazing. And I can't remember how many books I read that year, but I read like The Infinite Atonement, Jesus the Christ, The Miracle of Forgiveness. Like I read
Those
all
are
of these
big
books in a year
ones. Those are
on top
huge.
of the
Yeah.
triple. I know, on top of the triple combination. And I was going to school, but I had a really easy job where I was just sitting at a desk all day. So like I think that's why I was able to accommodate all this reading, but I was obsessed with it. And
Wow.
so they ministered to me by first by example and then being patient with me and all my questions.
Yeah.
But that when you brought up in the email that you wanted to talk about like how people ministered, the
Yeah.
thing that came to mind for me was like examples. Because once I got this fire inside me about the gospel, I was just like to my siblings, like, you guys have to join the church. This is amazing. And they were like not having it. They were like, you're crazy. I can't believe you're doing this. I remember they were very upset with me, honestly,
Mhm.
very, very upset with me. So I was kind of isolated for a while because I quit hanging out with my party friends. My family was upset with me
Yeah.
and but my mom, she was very supportive and she actually started coming back as well,
Wow.
like when I was coming back. And but she was married to somebody that was drinking, and her story is a little different, but she is now like very active in the church.
That's amazing.
And yeah, so that is kind of my story, and like a little bit about the ministering part.
No, I love that. I love the Christ-like example from other people, right? You never know when that can make a difference. That just being um having integrity, right? Like doing
Mhm.
something when you don't think other people are noticing or that you think it'll make a difference in their testimony or where they're at, that can make a difference, right? I remember when I'm a convert to the church, and that's one of the things that drew me to the church too, was just seeing how other people interacted. Um, and like one of my friends who works with the podcast here, she'll listen to this, but her family and and their example is what drew me to the church too. Like, why are you guys like the way that you are? And I think that Christ-like example really can make a difference in ministering, that sometimes we don't even know that we're ministering in that way.
100%. That reminds me, I didn't finish my thought. Sorry. So, when I was really eager to get my siblings to come back, I kept getting blessings just throughout this experience. And in every blessing, and they were coming from different people, I would get the same message inside it that was like, you are going to be an example to your family. Just like lead and teach by example. Because
Wow.
I was getting very frustrated with them. Like, why won't they listen to me? Like, I was just trying to shove it down their throat because I was so excited about it. But now that I think back, it's just very interesting to me that I had different people telling me the same message from God. Like, chill out, Lauren, just be an example like that. It's not the same formula for everybody to come back to church. And some people need a little more time or a little more space. And yeah, I've thought a lot about like just setting examples for the people around me. Um,
I love that
okay.
you said it's not the same formula. Like that, we should put that quote everywhere because that is so
Yeah, I
true. It's
love that.
not, yes, it's not the same formula for everybody.
Yeah, in preparing for this episode, I have been thinking a lot about, I haven't had like been like ministered to get me back to the church, but it was the examples that got me back to church. And um so the other day I actually went and I went and had lunch with my one boss who was like he's like my mentor. And I went and had lunch with him with my sister, who she also worked for him for like a year or so at one of the portfolio companies. So she knows him too. So we went with my girls and we all had lunch in his office. And we are leaving, and we brought up The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Like I was joking with him, like, because he lives in the Draper area. I was like, oh, do you see those girls at the gym? Like, I know you go to the tree house. Isn't that where like everybody like works out or whatever? And he was like, no, I go at like 5 in the morning, so I don't see anybody like that. But uh I asked him if he watched the show, and he was like, no. And I was like teasing him. But my sister, so my sister's like pretty against the church. So, but we still have a great relationship, but that's the only thing we fight about, so we just don't talk about it. But she was like, I can't even watch it. She's like, it's such a lie because I know I don't know a lot of like LDS people, but Lauren's LDS and I know how she is and she's nothing like them. And so it's just fake. And
Mm.
I was like, oh my gosh, what a compliment. And she didn't even mean to, but like, because we fight so much about the church, but for her to say that, I was like, by me doing what I'm supposed to be doing and living the gospel and keeping my covenants, my sister knows like what we're supposed to act like. I can't even explain to
Yeah.
you guys like what I almost cried when she said that.
Yeah.
That's
But it just
amazing.
solidified my thought of like, be the example. Just
Hmm.
wear your garments when you're
Yeah.
supposed to. And treat others with kindness and be forgiving and try not to be judgmental. It can be hard, but like
Yeah.
um, that's what's really been heavy on my mind is like we just need to be the example because I think that the world is going to continue to get darker and darker. People are
Mhm.
going to get more afraid. Things are like so chaotic. But when you have the light of the gospel, people are going to start to notice the members and they're really going to see this stark contrast that the world is going in such a drastically different direction
Yeah.
and they're going to see the light of the gospel and they're really going to start noticing members even more and they're going to want what we have. I really truly believe that that's going to start happening more and more.
I love that. I think that's so true, right? That we're supposed to be a peculiar people for a reason, right? That we
Yeah.
Right.
stand out and that people can see the goodness and what is brought to our lives because we make the choices, because of the choices that we make from that.
Right.
Yeah. I like being weird. Like I pride myself on it. I remember one time called my grandma weird. She got so offended. But like I love being weird and my friends and my family know that. But like I love that they say, peculiar. I can't say that word. But
Peculiar.
yes, because it's true. Like,
Mhm.
in this day and age, it's weird. It's the odd people that don't drink and don't smoke and don't drink coffee and like I don't know. I like being weird and I
Yeah.
like being in the gospel and
Yeah.
it's
I love
great.
that.
Yeah, my mom was a member when she married my dad, and so she's a convert too. And then 5 years later, he left her. And
Um,
so and after they moved across country, so then she was like stuck there with three little kids, brand new convert. So ministering was a huge impact in her life because she had no family, no friends, brand new convert.
wow.
So ministering can go a long way.
It can make a difference, right? It can really
Mhm.
make a difference. And I think that kind of like it's a good tie-in to the last question I wanted to ask you guys is, sometimes it can be frustrating when you are ministering to somebody who you think in your own mind, right, might not be receptive to what you're saying or what you're doing, and you can really get discouraged in your ministering efforts of, what should I be doing? What's going to make the difference here? What would you say to that sister who's listening to this episode and is in that phase of discouragement in their ministering efforts? I don't know if either one of you want to go first with that.
I think we've
My
talked about it.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a
Chris-
lag. You go. Go.
Christina, you go.
Okay. So I think we've definitely talked about a lot of ways, like consistency, just being their friend. Even though you're called to minister to, a person or not called to minister to them, just being a genuine friend. Like some of my favorite people are people that I was asked to minister to and that are just now my friends, right?
Yeah.
Like at first do it because are asked to, but then after like a time or two, like you just have that connection. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing.
That's another thing I just circled on my notes I was taking here is genuine. Just be genuine. It might be that it's an assignment or that it's a calling, but do you genuinely care about getting to know that person? Because people can feel that.
Yeah, and like Christ's love, like sometimes it's hard to know how to be genuine when you don't know someone, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know how to. get you to know that I love you because I don't know you yet.
Yeah.
But knowing that Christ loves them and that they're a child of God can help me to minister to them and
Yeah.
to just love them the way that Christ would, to
So
the best of my ability.
right, right. And he'll make up the difference, whatever we do,
Yeah.
right? Yes. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Lauren, what thoughts did you have?
Honestly, she like literally said everything I was gonna say. And the word genuine was on my mind before we even recorded. Yeah, just be
Yeah.
genuine. Um, and like being like Christ, like she literally said everything I was gonna say. So I'm not sure what else I want to add to that, but uh people just want to feel seen.
Mm,
And I know a lot I'm not gonna say it's Utah culture. I'm sure it's everywhere, but nobody uh everybody kind of has their guard up a little bit before they really get to know you. And um, sometimes by you being vulnerable, you're helping them to feel like they can be vulnerable. And if you're open and share, then they'll be open and share. And you can really like make a connection with that person. Whether they ever come to church or not, it's going to make a difference in the rest of their life. They will remember that.
yeah, that's
I
so true.
love that because people tell me I'm too blunt and too honest all the time, but I think more people need to be because then we can have more connections with people and relate to people and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one going through whatever I'm going through. The other thing
Mhm.
I think is important is like when you're coming back to church, or like even if you're not like back, you're just like visiting. Like it's hard to be there. My husband works every Sunday, so I sit by myself every Sunday, and it's really hard to go. But even if my anxiety doesn't want to talk to you, just having you sit next to me makes a world of difference for me. So if you
Yeah.
see someone new at church, even if you don't know them, even if you don't know what to say to them, I think it would make a world of difference to them to just sit by them and be like, hey, I saw you sitting alone. Do you mind if I sit by you?
Yeah.
And that, like, it just makes you feel not so alone.
Hmm. I love that. We're gonna have Lauren quotes out of here. People just want to be seen. Like, I think that's so true.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, Christina, is like you can see people just by sitting by people, right? Show them that they do matter, that you see that they exist just by sitting by them. And I think we don't have to have intense gospel conversations with people either to minister to them, but find out what their likes and their interests are. What are they struggling with? What are important things in their life? And remember that and just talk to them about it and bring that up when you see them so that they know that they're being seen by you and thought about and genuinely cared for because you remembered them.
Yeah, there was a new girl in my ward, and I didn't have the guts to go talk to her because I think I'm a shy person, but I talk a lot, so I don't know. Anyway, so but she made a comment in Sunday school, and so I found her number on LDS Tools, and I texted her and I said I really loved your comment because
Mm.
I was too scared to go up to her. But then after church, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. Heavenly Father, help me get the courage. So I went up and I was like, hi, I'm Kirstina, and she's like, oh hi, and she's like, I'm new in the board, and we just started talking. And she's like, what do you like? I was like, oh, I'm obsessed with Harry Potter. Like, I love all things Harry Potter. And she's like, oh, so does my best friend. I was like, me? Like, because I'm so socially awkward. And she's like, oh, that's funny. I was like, yep, we're best friends after 5 seconds. And she's like, we should exchange numbers. I was like, actually, I already texted you before I
Oh,
got the guts to come up. Anyway, and now we're really good friends. But it was just funny because,
awesome.
yeah, so now she just remembers that I like Harry Potter and that her best friend, who wasn't me, it was somebody else,
That's
also likes
awesome.
Harry Potter. But I
Just those
love that
details.
Lauren,
Yeah.
yeah, the details.
Yeah.
And I love that Lauren said that everybody's formula is different. That is so good to remember
Yeah.
because everybody,
Mhm.
it's totally different. Like me and my husband's stories are very, very different, even though we came back
Yeah.
to the gospel at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And just because what you do now doesn't make a difference immediately, like I hear that in your story too, Lauren, is that things that people taught you probably back in primary, right? Were coming back to your remembrance from the
Right.
Holy
Mhm.
Ghost. That we don't know that our ministering efforts to the 4-year-old in some beams isn't going to be brought back to their remembrance when they're 18, 20 years old, right? And investigating the church again, that we we don't have to see the fruits of our labor immediately to know that our label will eventually make a difference for somebody.
Love that.
Yeah. And we have to be at church to make that difference, right? Like we have so many people in our ward now that don't come because they're like, church shut down during COVID. We don't need to go to church. But
Right.
we need them. We need their spirit. We need their light. We need their guidance. We need their love. We need,
Their
to be
thoughts,
able to
ideas.
be there. So,
I love that. Yes, that can be our ministering efforts too. Come to church and participate, right? Because you don't know
yes.
when your comment makes a difference, makes a friend, makes a connection with somebody. If you feel prompted, follow through with it because you don't know what God knows on the other side of that, the details of what He's making connections with, and that having that trust in God. That when we have that prompting, He's telling us that for a reason, and we may not see why that is, but He is making that connection for a reason.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
made me
Because,
think of something that I was wondering why it was when I was listening to like the Oliver Cowdery episode on the Comeback podcast, and I can't remember what it was that made me think like, why do I go to church? Because sometimes I feel like I learn more when I'm just like reading on my own. And well, partly because I'm like in nursery and primary now, so like
Right, right.
not that you don't learn anything, but
Yeah.
uh, I was just like, why do I go to church? Like, and then I just had this thought that if I'm not going to church to get things from other people, then I need to be going to strengthen those around me. If I feel like I'm in a really good spot and I have a really strong testimony, like I need to be using that and help strengthen those around me. So I need to show up for other people.
Yeah.
yeah, because like I am the activities chairman for Relief Society, and it's like I'm not going to stop coming to church because of this, but it's discouraging when you plan a whole activity, nobody shows up, right?
Yeah.
It's just like me and one person. And
Yeah.
so like showing up to support other people in their callings is a huge way to minister because we make covenants in the temple to give of our time and talents, and that includes supporting other people
Mm.
in following their time and talents to do their callings, and I think that's really important.
That's so true.
Love that.
That's so true. So many different ways we can minister that we don't think of that are outside of our assigned ministering person, right? That there's so many ways that we can do this. And what I hear from you guys, like a lot of those things that made a difference weren't the people that were exactly assigned to you either, right? That
Right.
they
Yeah,
came in lots of different ways, and we never know when that might make a difference.
because it was my companion, it wasn't my
Right?
ministers,
Yeah.
right? It was the person I was assigned to be companions with.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I just learned so much from you guys. And I think it gives, for me, I feel hope and peace and encouragement when I think about the efforts that I can give to the people around me, that it doesn't need to be something gigantic, that I can just be myself and then I can be genuine and really just get to know somebody and that it can make a difference.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. Like you're a great
Yes.
host. I
Oh,
really enjoyed you, and
thank you.
thank you for doing this and using your time and talents because you're a really good host. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I love you
Oh,
and your
thank you.
class and all the things. Like one of the ways I've been feeling the spirit is through you. And I call my mom and I'm like, guess what I learned in class this week? And she's on a mission in Germany. And so we just share it. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you
so
so much.
cool.
I appreciate you guys taking your time and sharing your stories. I'm so excited to share this episode with others, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.